So good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Laura Robinson and I am the program coordinator for the Finger Lakes Geriatric Education Center. We are a HRSA funded GWEP, Geriatric Workforce Enhancement Program at the University of Rochester in Rochester, New York. And welcome to our second session of the Older Adults and Opioids webinar series. We are co-sponsoring this series with the Western New York Rural Area Health Education Center. So we are so glad you could join us today. I do have a few housekeeping items to let you know about. If you are on Zoom with us on your computer, that's fantastic. There is a toolbar located at the bottom of your screen. There's two important buttons there. There's a participant button, which will show you the list of everyone in this meeting today. If you did not set up an account or are using the phone to listen, you can just hover over your name or number and rename yourself, and that's going to make it easier for me to find you and unmute you later for comments and questions. And for our all-important data reporting to HRSA, who funds us, they want to know names of everyone that's attending, so thank you for everyone who's got your name in there. I appreciate it. And I will put a message in the chat to have everyone, the chat button is in your toolbar as well. That's number 2. I will ask you all to type in a hello, introduce yourself, and use that to ask questions. Everyone will be muted through this presentation. Questions will be held, I think until the end of the presentation, unless you have a really burning question, we can interrupt Ednita. She doesn't mind that. She may ask you a few questions as well. Right. And you may add questions to the chat box at any time. And just to tell you a little bit about us, the Finger Lakes Geriatric Education Center has been continuously funded by HRSA since 1999, so a little over 20 years. We currently serve a 25-county area of the Finger Lakes region in upstate New York, but truly we serve all of New York State through collaborations with many academic and community-based partners. Through educational initiatives targeting all healthcare providers and family caregivers, the goal of the FLGEC is to transform clinical training environments by integrating geriatrics into primary care delivery systems, resulting in an age-friendly health system, as well as dementia-friendly communities. Our co-sponsor is the Western New York Rural Area Health Education Center, or R-AHEC. It is a nonprofit organization headquartered in Warsaw, New York, and the R-AHEC's mission is to improve health and healthcare through education. Counties in their catchment area include Allegheny, Cattaraugus, Chautauqua, Genesee, Livingston, Monroe, Ontario, Orleans, Steuben, Wayne, Wyoming, and Yates. And the R-AHEC addresses the health needs of its communities by focusing on health work development, preceptor development and student housing, pipeline programming, and rural healthcare technology infrastructure development. So the reach and the mission of the R-AHEC made them the perfect partner to help us with this specific educational initiative. So we're really pleased to bring you this webinar series featuring the most relevant information on the opioid crisis and how it affects older adults. Our featured speaker today is Dr. Ednita Wright, who is a highly credentialed PhD, LCSW, and CASAC. She is the professor and chair of the Human Services Teacher Education Department at Onondaga Community College in Syracuse, as well as a professor in the Alcohol and Substance Abuse Counseling Department. Dr. Wright has worked at a variety of institutions within the Central New York area, both private and public. She has written on topics of addiction, HIV and AIDS, and cultural inclusion. Dr. Wright is deeply interested in language and its importance in decreasing exclusion and stigma. Dr. Wright has received numerous awards for her commitment to the community and to the art of teaching. She has consulted for over 25 years with community agencies and academic institutions regarding issues of bias with the primary objective of moving away from tolerance to authentic inclusion for all. So with that, I will now turn the program over to Dr. Ednita Wright. So take it away.
Oh, hello. Hello, everybody. Okay, now, first of all, I just want everybody to know I'm really glad that you're here with me. This is the first time I'm doing something like this. I'm usually in front of a live audience, and I gain energy from that audience. So I'm hoping that you all will feel my energy. And if you have any questions, as Laura said, if you can't hold them to the end, please interrupt me, because I'd rather you go forward with clarity rather than thinking about your question the whole time that I'm presenting. I hope all of you are good today, and I'm going to try to take you through this with just really going along with my PowerPoint, except I may add in some things as we go along. I hope everybody can hear me, and so here we go. This particular talk is about wisdom keepers, and wisdom keepers is the subject of this talk. Specifically, wisdom keepers that are caught in addiction, and specifically opioid addiction. and how loneliness, stigma, and shame intensifies the impact of addiction. Wisdom keepers are those folks, in my opinion, that are record keepers of the family, the town, the community, the nation, and the world. In some places, they are still revered for the stories they tell and the knowledge those stories impart. I call those stories little nuggets of wisdom about life. We are losing our wisdom keepers to addiction, specifically opioid and alcohol addiction. So let's talk a little bit about statistics. We know that prescription opioids in the last 5 years or so have contributed to overdoses, particularly in our wisdom keeper population, our elderly population. We know that older adults are more at risk, and the reason they are is because they're given medication for things that happen as we get older. Joints get a little crickety, you hurt your hip, you hurt your elbow, you hurt some things, and what happens is you have a lot of pain. And unfortunately, we were given a bill of goods when the pharmaceutical company said opioids were not addictive and found out that they were addictive. Now, what complicates that for older people too is older folks take a lot of different medications, usually by the time they are considered wisdom keepers. And they also have sometimes memory problems. If they have memory problems and they go, for instance, for an example, my aunt has dementia and probably the beginnings of Alzheimer's. And so she goes to her little pill case, and her pill case is empty. Now, it's the 1 week that she's already passed, but she thinks she doesn't have any pills. So let's say if she did have pills in there on the same day, she could take both sets of pills because she forgot that she took them before. This is where opioids become deathly. Between 2006 and 2012, the United States emergency rooms saw a 78% rise in visits involving seniors and prescription and illicit drug use. Only 10% of those visits included opioids, and over half of the patients were over the age of 75. So why? Why is it happening? Okay. Well, one of it is that opioids help relieve depression and anxiety. They're a pain medication, but they're kind of an all-purpose pain medication. And as any of you that have taken pain medication knows, that it makes you subdued. It helps you relieve the pain, but it also subdues your intellectual processes and your mood, okay? The other reason is loneliness. We have found, and in a minute Laura's going to show you a clip that talks about loneliness and how loneliness in the next 20, 25 years is going to be our highest health concern, is loneliness. For older people, for wisdom keepers, what happens with loneliness is if you have no family, your partner is deceased, you're now in a housing project or a housing facility for wisdom keepers, but nobody comes to visit you. Nobody sees you. Your family believes you're taken care of, so they kind of just leave you there. In our country, we have done a turn on wisdom keepers. It used to be that wisdom keepers kept as part of the family. They also were kept with the family, all right? Like my family is from South Carolina. My job as the oldest child is if my mother becomes not able to stay in her own house, then either she comes to live with me or I go to live with her. That's the way the culture works, but not all cultures work that way. But we as Americans have, I think, sometimes turned our back on wisdom keepers and not provided some of the things that they need in order to feel like they are still useful and viable to their community. The other thing is chronic pain. We talked about chronic physical pain due to injury or other health issues. Physical and social isolation is another one. And remember that the more you take opioids, the more isolated you become. Because first of all, these are folks that have never been into this whole drug game, as I call it, right? These are folks that probably maybe drank alcohol when they were younger, but they didn't do any other sorts of drugs while they were younger. They did alcohol, but we know alcohol is another kind of drug right now that is hurting our wisdom keepers as well. The death of a partner, and obviously grief and loss. And so what I'd like to do now is show the the YouTube video on loneliness and the fact that this Surgeon General talks about it as the fact that loneliness is a big concern in our culture today. Here we go.
I don't, should be able to share. I think they can hear.
Oh, they can hear, but I can't hear.
I think she overrides
She overrides me.
me, yes.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I know what he says. I mean, you know.
Okay.
Oh, people are chatting up a storm.
Yeah. Wait here.
Oh, wait a minute. This is muted. Is it muted? Oh, it isn't muted.
No.
Oh, good. No sound on video. Oh, there it is.
You stirred it a second ago. What did you do? Because that's her end. You're not playing the videos. You're just seeing them.
Can't hear it. No, it doesn't seem like they can hear it. Because I can't hear it. Oh,
Looks like the video stopped her. We can go back out again. She's switching at the far end. That's what she's doing, right?
it's almost ended.
That's not you. It's breaking up on her.
Whoop. So Ednita, you can go back to your screen now.
Okay. All righty. Hello, people. Oh, I'm sorry about the glitches, but you know, sometimes that happens. Okay, so we just looked at the fact that loneliness creates a fertile ground for substance abuse, as far as I'm concerned. And in fact, the end of what the doctor was saying was the fact that we need each other. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because, to me, anybody in terms of addiction, we need each other to get through it. Loneliness on top of that makes it harder, but it's important that we understand that we need each other in order to have optimal health and optimal lives. I'm not saying that loneliness is the only reason for the abuse and addiction of wisdom keepers, but it doesn't help. All of us cling to something or someone to get through times of confusion, hardship, death of a loved one, moving into a nursing home, or not being with family. What I'm saying to you is, by taking substances, whether it's sugar, caffeine, nicotine, chocolate, or opioids, we can delude ourselves into believing that all is well. And if all isn't, the sting of whatever that situation is lessened by the substance, at least for a little while. In addition, with the change and reform in our social structure of the modern society, the value and importance of elders or wisdom keepers has become more obscure. I want us to consider that for a moment, because the fact of the matter is that we have difficulties both with how we see wisdom keepers and also how we see addicts. So I have a question for you. How are wisdom keepers treated in this country? What do we believe about getting older? What do we believe about folks who are addicted? And how do we treat addicts in this country? Now, what I'd like you to do is, if you can, go on your little chat and send me some thoughts about those questions. First one being, how are wisdom keepers treated in this country? So what are your thoughts about that? Can you hear me? Hello.
So Ednita, the
Yes.
first one we've got says people believe they aren't active contributors to society. We don't treat them well.
Mm-hmm.
Valueless, dismissed by the young who don't know or recognize their value.
Mm-hmm.
Invisible, children and youth are afraid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I would agree in that they are extremely undervalued, capable of making choices. There is a general lack of respect for our elders. In fact, there is a general lack of, quote, greater good, unquote, concept.
Nice.
Burden to society.
Really nice. What do you believe about getting older? What are some people out there believe about getting older? Because we have a lot of myths about getting older. So what are some of your beliefs?
It's hard.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Old age ain't for sissies.
I love that saying.
Yes.
I think that saying so good. Yes, yes, yes.
You aren't as sharp. I will be invisible. The older you get, the more you lose. They are not hired as much. We are not as old as our age indicates.
Right.
It's painful. Example, arthritis. Work is less important and attention is turned to relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
Less desirable on all levels, but we'll be smarter.
Right.
I do think that with education, access, and the ability to adapt to one's environment, one can age successfully.
Mm-hmm. Well, because the whole aging process depends on our perspective, doesn't it? So if our perspective is going to be, it's going to be hard, it's going to be drudgery, it's not for sissies, which it really isn't, you know. But the fact is that that's the way we see it. So let me ask you this question: what do you believe about folks who are addicted?
Same notions.
Same notions. Okay.
They are insecure. It's hard. Oh, please repeat the question.
Oh, yes. What do you believe about folks who are addicted?
So Lisa says, I know it's not true, but that it's their own fault somehow.
Uh-huh. Very good, because that's a huge myth. Go ahead.
Society thinks that they are weak.
Yes.
Someone said ditto to Lisa. Thanks, Tracy.
Mm-hmm.
Addiction is a disease which can be treated, but only if the person wants help.
Right, right.
They are struggling. Their ability to cope does not match their pain. They lack appropriate coping skills. Society thinks it's a choice. They are lost and struggling. They are selfish. They don't have an understanding of addiction, not even their providers. I think that's a key point right there.
Exactly.
They're escaping and self-medicating.
Right. So given that, how do you see us treating addicts in this country?
D.P. Morrison says not very well.
Yes.
Poorly, it's a problem. Poorly was capitalized.
Okay.
Disposable, as lepers.
Yeah.
I think our method has been reactive instead of proactive.
Right, right.
More education is needed. We are not supportive enough. We tend to criticize rather than support.
Exactly.
Sometimes addicted people don't understand the extent of how deep they are in.
Right, exactly.
And we, sometimes the clinicians, sometimes the support services, look at people as if they are the disease and not the person.
Right.
And we got another agreed on the reactive, not proactive.
Right. So as you can see, addicts, there's myths about addicts, there's myths about getting older or being wisdom keepers. The problem is that we don't treat those two populations with the respect that they deserve because they're human beings. We have a lot of things about addicts. So think about if you are 65, 70 years old, you have lived your life, you did your job, you worked hard, you raised your family, and now you find that somebody is saying to you, you're addicted to the pill that provides you relief in the pain that you have in your body. And in fact, not only tell you that you're addicted to it, but now treat you like an addict. And most addicts are treated as if all the things that you said, they're invisible, they deserve it, they're selfish, etc. And we know for people that work with addicts, that is not true. So thank you for answering the questions. So there's two things that I think are going on that even more further complicates addiction for wisdom keepers, but for all addicts. One is stigma. In our country, there's a huge stigma about being an addict. And in fact, there are people that are supposed to be caring for addicts that believe that addicts just need to get over it and find better coping skills or figure out what they need to do. And depending on what they're addicted to, that stigma goes even further, right? So we know that stigma in a social context occurs when there's extreme disapproval or disdain. Now, I want you to get into the disdain part, right? Disapproval, yes, there are things that people disapprove about what we do, but disdain is almost hate. It's almost like they're dirty, they're terrible to even be around. But we also know that that really doesn't help somebody that's ill. I want you to think about a diabetic, okay, that comes into their doctor and says, I'm not doing the insulin no more. I'm not shooting myself in the stomach. I'm not doing that at all. Now, usually, or at least what I know, is that a diabetic is going to be responded to, okay, so how can we make this better for you? How can we figure out how you can take this without it being so bad? If an addict comes in and says, I can't get away from using the needle, we look at the addict sometimes like they're a piece of dirt, right? It's no different. Addicts get addicted not just to the drug sometimes, but to the way the drug comes in their body. So I'm just trying to give you other things to think about when you think about addiction. But the other thing is that we have to figure out how we're going to move away or move people away from this stigma. It's the same thing with being old. When we're older, people have a stigma about us, about what we can and can't do, where we should and should not work, whether we should drive or not. Now, there's some people, when they get too old, we shouldn't be driving at all. We know that, okay? But the fact is that we want people to feel optimal. optimally about their life for as long as they can, right? So that's stigma. So that's one of the other things that complicates this. The second one is shame. Shame is something very powerful. I believe that probably everybody that's listening here, knows about shame, has felt it at some point in time in their lives. And it is something that once it gets in the psyche, to feel shameful about what you're doing, it's hard to release the psyche from it. Now, we know what it is. It's inferiority, it's self-loathing, it's all of those things. But the fact is, we as helpers, or as I call healers, we sometimes exacerbate that shame by saying like, well, why'd you get yourself in that kind of mess? Well, you should know better than that. You're 75 years old. Why would you do that? Just because somebody's 75 years old doesn't mean they know anything about addiction or the fact that some of the drugs they are taking are addictive, okay? So, next. All right. I'm going to go backwards again. Shame and stigma are heavy burdens to carry because it skews my perception, your perception of reality. It encourages self-harm in a variety of ways, and it keeps a human being from asking for help when it's needed. We perpetuate the stigma and shame with our own biases or lack of information. It is curious to me that we would stigmatize another for a malady that we now know is a brain disorder. The moral theory of addiction has been proven otherwise, and still there are practitioners that treat patients with substance abuse disorder as if they're morally corrupt. The term substance use disorder is more clinically accurate in terms of what the constellation happens when somebody is addicted to a drug. The hope was that changing the term would change practitioners' interactions with people. So I'm going to show you just a little something that talks about, this is what, these are just some quotes from addicts. Just because I'm an addict doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Now I'm putting these out for you because I think some of you already know this, but I'm just putting it out as a reminder that the way in which we interact with people have a lot to do about whether they're going to get better or not. So I'm trying to get you to understand that we need to check the words that we use in order to deal with the folks that we deal with. So here's some of the words that we use. Non-stigmatizing words: a person with a substance abuse disorder rather than an abuser, a junkie, a drunk, an addict. A substance abuse disorder or addiction, not just a drug habit. Now, changing language is a very difficult thing to do. I know that. It's very difficult, but I'm trying to give you ways in which to think about it and then change your language if you find yourself falling into a habit of saying, well, they're just a drunk. Well, what does that mean, they're just a drunk? It doesn't give, they're already in the hole then. Are they coming out of the hole, or do they want to come out of the hole? These are things that we need to look at. So, as a wisdom keeper, to find yourself in the abyss of addiction is excruciatingly layered and painful. Because just because I'm older and I have an opioid addiction doesn't mean I'm morally corrupt, doesn't mean that I'm just a waste of a human being. It means that I have an addiction that I need treatment for. It is counterintuitive to go to a place, any place, that would treat you badly, right? You don't like going to a doctor. If a doctor treats you badly when you go to a doctor, at least for me, I don't see the doctor again. I find another doctor, because somebody that's going to be that intimately relating to me, I want to make sure that they respect me. So let me take you to what I think is the importance here, the big thing that I want to leave you with, and that is the importance of language. The way in which we describe people, the way in which we serve up people, the way in which we perceive people comes out in our language. Whether or not, see, the thing is that some of us believe that we can hide biases. We can't hide biases. It's in your tone of voice, in the way you move toward or away from someone. It's not just in the words. So what I'd like to take you through is what I call, or what is called, the respect model. And the respect model comes from OMH Think Cultural Health. You can look it right up. It's right there. So, okay. All right. So rapport is the first one. Now we all know that we're supposed to have rapport with our patients or clients, but do we? Do we trust, or is it that we allow trust to develop when someone comes to us and says, I need help? First of all, coming to say that you need help is courageous to begin with. I don't care who you are. To say that you need help outside your family, outside your community, to a stranger is a very difficult thing to do. And I don't think we give people enough credit for that. Do we see what's happening to the patient from their point of view and not ours? Do we consciously suspend judgment? We all judge everybody. We do it all the time, but there's ways in which to suspend that judgment and actually hear what the person is saying, hear what the person is trying to tell you, even though the words may not be the words you would use to describe it. The other thing is recognize and avoid making assumptions. We make assumptions all the time about people by the way they look, by the way they dress, by if they have tattoos or not, by the way they wear their hair, whether they wear glasses or not, how they're dressed and what shoes they wear. What I'm saying is we as healers need to recognize and avoid making those kinds of assumptions when we walk in a room with a client or patient. The second one is empathy. We all know what empathy is, right? I'm sure that you all could give me a perfect, beautifully definition of empathy. Yes. But what I want to know is, do you really meet people where they are? Are you really meeting them where they are or where you want them to be? Do we allow the client to tell their story? This is a difficult one because now we're in this like hurry up phase. Most of us in treatment, people have about 30 minutes to talk to you or whatever. Well, think about yourself and you're talking to your friends and you're telling a story. It usually takes more than 30 minutes. When I tell a story, I'm into the story, right? So you're telling a story, but our patients need time to tell their story of how they got here. Remember that folks are courageous because they are making themselves vulnerable to you, somebody they don't know at all. And then cultural humility is really important. So I'm going to show another video. I don't know whether I should show it or you should show it, Laura.
I'm thinking maybe we try you showing it.
Okay, let me try. So hold on, folks. We're working it out. Here it is. No, it's not.
All
Okay.
right, so you have to stop sharing screen.
Oh, stop sharing.
And then start the video.
Red button, stop. Okay, thank you. And then I go to this.
Oh, no, wait,
Oh, wait a minute, hear me. Uh-oh. That's not gonna work. Wait a minute. It's not gonna do it, is it? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. Wait, whoa, whoa. No.
You have the video open yet?
It was open. It's gone now.
Oh.
That's not a good thing. They can hear me, can't they? Mm-hmm.
Have her open it
Then go ahead and open it, Laura. I'm gonna go back to share it, right?
Yeah. Everybody else can hear it but you. Yeah, once it's done, yes. Which goes back to your.
Okay, back to you, Ednita.
Okay. Oh,
There you go.
okay. So I'm sorry if you couldn't hear it, but the fact is that what happened in that video is the doctor came in and assumed that he should have the ability to look and check out the woman who was saying to him clearly that that was not going to happen. Now, I don't believe the doctor went in there believing that, you know, that was going to happen. But what I'm saying to you is that sometimes we forget that people have rights or cultural pieces that they adhere to that need to be respected. So the next video is support. Okay, so we're RES, PC, no, RES. Ask about and understand the barriers to care and compliance. Sometimes we just have to ask people, what is it that you need in order for me to help you? Help the patient overcome barriers involving family members, if appropriate. Reassure the patient you are and will be available to help. Most people just want to know, we're going to go the distance. Are we going to go the distance with them after they tell our story? Because a lot of what they're telling us are things they have never told anyone. So RESP, we are supposed to be in partnership. Healers are in partnership. Indigenous healers are in partnership with the person that they are trying to heal. We should be in partnership with those people. So that means that we need to be flexible. Sometimes things are going to be so different that we have to really pull on ourselves to understand what's going on. We have to negotiate what roles we're going to have with a particular person. And we have to stress that you are working together to address a health problem, but that you're working together. People should not walk out of where we are and believe that they're being done to, or that somebody's doing something to them, but that they are an active participant in the healing process. Explanations. Check often for understanding, because sometimes even when we're using the same words, we have a different meaning for those words. Even the word respect. If I asked each one of you, how would you define it? You'd have a different way of defining it, or a different way people could show you that they respect you. So make sure you understand what people believe respect is for them. Make sure you understand what the patient is saying to you. Don't assume that you know. Don't pretend that you know. Just ask. People love talking about themselves, and they love talking about themselves if it's going to help them get to the goal they want to. And then I believe listening with your heart. You know, if your heart's not in it, to me, you shouldn't be doing it at all. Some people do it anyway. But the fact is, I believe that you need to come to it with your heart. And then there's cultural competency. Now, we've tossed around cultural competency for a long time. You know, we used to call it diversity, now we call it cultural competency. But really what it is about is respecting another person's cultural beliefs. You don't know what everybody's cultural belief is. You know, even as an African American or Black woman, I don't know every single thing for every single Black population or African American population, because it is impacted by environment, about how people were raised, about where they're raised, about economics, all of those things. But we have the responsibility to try and understand what are the cultural beliefs that may hinder or help the healing process. Understand that the patient's view you may define by ethnic and cultural stereotypes, but try not to do that. Try to hold your stereotypes at bay. Be aware of your own cultural biases and preconceptions, because all of us have them. Know your limitations in addressing health issues across cultures, and then understand your personal style and recognize when it may not be working with that given patient. Don't say like the doctor did, well, she was just giving me a hard time. She wasn't trying to give you a hard time. She was expressing the fact that for her, no one can look underneath Harjeeb without her husband being present, period, particularly a man. So here we go with one more video. Boy, oh boy, we're gonna see how that one goes. Or we can pass it by, I don't know. What do you wanna do? Okay, wait a minute. Tell
I'm
me.
muted. I was going to say, maybe we should just skip it and I will send them the link.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go back to sharing the screen. Okay, so we're going to pass that by, and Laura's going to send that to you. So the next part is trust. Sometimes I believe that we as healers, we don't trust the process of healing. The process of healing is about relationships, you know, and if we're in relationship with someone and we are forthright and honest about what we're doing, and we really care that the person gets to the place that they want to be, that process will just take place if we allow it to happen. We have to trust that if we come halfway, the client or patient is going to come halfway. People need to be coaxed sometimes in the healing process because most people have had a bad experience or multiple bad experiences with the healing process. If we show that we trust them, then they will in turn start to trust us. So the respect model is rapport, empathy, support, partnership, explanation, cultural competence, and trust. And the reason I'm moving is because I really want to hear your questions and any kind of comments you have. Wisdom keepers, just as others with substance use disorder, don't want to be caught in the abyss of addiction. Nobody wants to be caught in the abyss of addiction because all they want really is to stop the pain. Remember that we are committed to help others heal. The process requires us to acknowledge the pain without judgment and to embrace those that are suffering with a substance use disorder. For our wisdom keepers, they just want to live the remaining days they have in peace and relatively pain-free. They don't need judgment. They don't need a lecture. They need us to see them. Anybody see Avatar? You know, that see them as they are and as they want to be, and help them find that place again. So many of our elderly population are forgotten about or disregarded. One day we will all be there if we're lucky. You know, we'll all be there. We'll be older. Is this how we want to be treated? Look at and check yourself about how do you want to be treated. Our elderly deserve to be honored and respected. And I love this picture. That's why I'm showing it. Look at all those beautiful faces. They're just lovely. And so my last one just gives, you know, thank you. And I'm willing to take questions or comments.
Okay, so everyone, you can type your questions for Ednita in the chat box and I can read them to her, or if you would like to be unmuted, I'm happy to unmute you and you can personally ask Ednita or Dr. Wright your questions. Is it okay if they call you Ednita? Because
Sure.
now I just called you Ednita.
No, it's okay.
Okay, first question came in.
Okay.
And the quote is, when the elderly die, a library is lost and volumes of wisdom and knowledge are gone, end quote.
Oh,
and
nice.
Morrison says, we certainly have a lot to learn from them.
Absolutely. And in fact, that's what I really get very sad about, that we're losing. We're losing that library because they feel that people don't want that library anymore. It's important that we have that. It's the history that we need in order to do better in the future. Thank you for the quote.
And Amira says, how do we tackle different messages from different providers? Not all are committed to dealing with the problem rather than just prescribing meds.
I think we just have to hammer at it because I think it's hard for people that believe that all they have to do is give somebody a medication to change that, right? So I think we have to keep saying to them, look, this person needs a little bit more than you than just giving them a pill. They need to have some explanation of why they're taking the pill, whether the pill is addictive or not. If it is addictive and they become addictive, what happens to them? You know, because one of the things that we are, or at least what I'm learning as I go around and talk about wisdom keepers, is the addiction field hasn't figured out what to do with people that are older, with wisdom keepers, in terms of treatment. So I think all of us, our best selves, need to try to figure out what is it that they need in order for them to either turn around on the addiction or at least get more better help, more comprehensive help.
So Lisa Richards from Ithaca College says she's reading the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver.
Oh my God,
and
yes.
In the book, the elders in the Congo are looked up to and revered because they survived that long. They didn't starve or die of disease, so they are considered very special.
Yes. Absolutely. And I mean, we could learn a lot from our indigenous population, even our populations, our new immigrants that are coming here, that believe in family being together, believe in caring for their older folks, making sure that they stay a viable part of the family and the community. It's not, there used to be a time when we did that as Americans. I mean, I'm talking generally speaking. We did that. Our parents moved in with us when they got too older and couldn't be by themselves. We've stopped doing that. And now we have these places that we shoot them off to. I have nothing against places that are wisdom keepers care homes. I don't have anything, because some wisdom keepers have no family or whatever. But the fact is, we need to think about, are those places providing really what our wisdom keepers need, or are they just isolating them more?
So another comment is cultural humility really resonated during this webinar. I will definitely pay it forward by educating myself and others on this important concept. Thank you so much for sharing such valuable information.
Thank you so much for the comment. And I'm glad that you picked up on cultural humility, because that really is what most of it is all about. All of us think that our culture is the best, because, that's what we were raised in, I mean, but the fact is, there are parts of our culture, at least mine, for me, I've kind of left behind because it wasn't helpful in my life now. My family in Charleston, South Carolina, for a long time, believed they would not allow any white people in their homes. Okay, so I was raised with that they don't come into your house, right? They can sit on the porch, have a little lemonade, a little cookie, but they can't come into your house. That doesn't bode well for my life in 2020, for me to do that, because I have a lot of people that are friends of mine, that are people I really care about, that are white people. But you understand what I'm saying? But to leave that back there and say grandma or auntie was wrong, I'm not saying they were wrong. For their time, it was probably what they needed to do, or they felt that was important to do. We all need to remember, our culture changes, but we have control on how it changes.
So going back to the comment earlier about providers and dealing with different providers just prescribing meds, there's a comment that says, isn't part of the problem that we have just come to expect an immediate cure, and usually via a pill?
Oh, absolutely. I talk about this to my students all the time. We're into quick fixes here in America. That's what we do. So what's important is, there are other ways and other techniques we can show, not only our wisdom keepers, but addicts or anyone that needs a healing. And it's things like meditation, things like eating well, things like slowing down, things like realizing the pill is not going to take care of the problem. It will relieve the symptoms most times, but it's not going to take care of the actual problem. And so what else can I do? And we as healers need to have alternatives for our folks to grab hold of if they want, even if it's just a pamphlet with new information, or a conversation with an acupuncturist, or getting a massage once a month. We need to have those other things available in our little toolbox.
So the next chat is from Gina. She says, training and support on how to have meaningful and satisfying interactions with older adults who have cognitive or sensory impairments are important. This may help decrease the isolation. She is currently working with a team of OT students to develop a quote-unquote dementia visitors training program.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's great. So when you get that done, please write me, so that if you have any going down to Charleston or in Syracuse, New York, I can use them for my auntie. But this is really good. See, this is the thing that needs to start happening. We need to start creating programs that are going to satisfy this particular need. It's just what I've been trying to do in New York. As I go around, is talking about, okay, treatment centers, what are we going to do? What are we going to do for wisdom keepers when they come to us? We can't just send them to the hospital. We can't just send them to a home. We need to know what to do. So I'm trying to start working on that. So, but please let me know if you get that started. I'd really appreciate that.
And the next is from Anna. She says, what are some advocacy efforts that you would recommend for individuals who work with older adults that want to make a difference in the way they are treated? She loves the respect model. It seems to resonate with not only the field of mental health or addictions, but also in helping any professional working with any population. Will utilize it in my practice.
Absolutely. See, I think, first of all, I see every person that comes in to see me as an advocate for the concern that they have. But you got to get them to the point that they feel comfortable enough to talk about what has happened to them before, and talk about what is it that they really need. we need to start recording those conversations. And I don't mean recording like, like a microphone. I mean, writing down, what did that person say and what did you try to do to help them? We also need to realize we don't always have to be in the front of advocacy. We can promote the folks that we see and help them get to the right places to advocate for better services for themselves. But one thing I always am cautioned about, and that I want to make sure they're ready for that kind of role, because they're going to get pushback. And so I don't want them to feel so vulnerable that they get hurt through the process. I want them to be ready to do it, and whoever's receiving them also be ready to receive. At first, I'm a little protective, so I hope that answers your question.
And the next comment and question is from Kathy. She says, or Catherine Tucker, she says, is the goal removing all narcotics from all patients? Are those who are dependent on narcotics for quality of life and social interactions addicts? I do not hear any discussions about functional management, just many patients being labeled addicts because they take a pill every day. The conversation has to change, and the providers need to actually evaluate their patients instead of simply refusing to prescribe.
Absolutely. In the one that, in the last video that we did not see, that is addressed, because a young man that's Latino comes in and the doctor decides that he must be addicted to the medication that he was being given. And it's not true. For some Latino men, particularly if they receive a surgery, it's not until after, not before do they want the medication to take away the pain, but after the surgery is when they want to go back to work, that they want something to relieve the pain then. And it's not about taking it because they're addicted to it. It's just that they need that in order to get back to work sooner, as well as to get back to work more comfortably until they can wean themselves off. You're absolutely right. We need to have more conversation about this. And what we have to do as healers, depending on who we are, well, it doesn't matter who we are. If we're healers, that we must demand, particularly people that prescribe, that they don't just prescribe blindly, that they actually go through some sort of assessment with the folks. And if they don't want to go through the assessment, then have someone else do the assessment and feed them that information before they write that script again for that person or call them an addict. We good?
We are good. I do not see any other questions.
Okay.
So last chance. We have the opportunity today to end a little bit early. We went over last time, so this kind of helps balance it out.
So everybody's okay? I'm glad that you're
okay.
I appreciate you coming to this webinar, and I hope it being my first webinar that it was okay. It seemed okay to me. I'm glad for the questions that you asked and the comments that you made, and we'll make sure that you have those videos. Once you see them, I think that you'll really appreciate them. And also, you can go on that website and get other videos from
Cultural health. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we've got lots of thank yous coming in. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated. Thanks. It was great. Great discussion. Blessings to you.
Oh,
so Dr. Wright, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom on this topic.
Okay.
So thanks, everyone. Look for a couple emails from me. I apologize for the video glitches, but we'll send you the links and you can listen to them over and over again.
Thanks
and
a lot.
we will see you all next month, March 10th, where Dr. Paul Doherty will be with us. So take care until then.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye, Ednita. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Laura.